Pleased to be joined now by ESPN NFL analyst Dan Orlovsky, whose appearances on One Bills Live are presented by Caesars Sportsbook, an official mobile sports betting partner of the Buffalo Bills. All right, Dan, first, Bills-Colts. I think a lot of us felt that the Bills were going to be able to outlast that team. I was of the opinion that the Colts are easier to defend, especially run game-wise, with Flacco in the lineup as opposed to Richardson. And after a shaky first half, run defense-wise, they really kind of locked it down. I mean, Taylor has 5 carries for 7 yards in the second half, and then I realized Colts have to throw because the game got a little away from them. But what do you make of this theory, Dan? Because we've witnessed this a lot so far this season. It almost feels like defensive coordinator Bobby Babich adopts this feeling-out approach in the first half, and they may get gashed here or there on a couple of plays. And we get to the second half, and it is in lockdown mode.
Yeah, I mean, that's great coaching. I mean, I remember being a young player in the NFL and getting coaches broken down in really 3 different phases. Number one, a bad coach watches the tape from the previous day and says, oh, we should have done this. And a really good coach takes what they're seeing at halftime and says, well, this is how we have to change. And then an elite coach figures it out in a drive or two. And I think that's, a really encouraging sign with Babich and this defense. I would say that the thing that, showed in the first half that didn't show in the second half was a lot of those first half runs that gashed them were with some form of motion. They were showing Buffalo defensively things that, a lateral motion and then snap would happen. And sometimes they would run to it. Sometimes they would run away from it. And it just seemed that the eye discipline for Buffalo, or the way that they were bumping over with that motion or replacing, was off. And really in the second half, it seemed a lot more settled. It seemed a lot less moving parts that were kind of being attached to that motion. And so, I think that it's always a good thing that when you have evidence that your coaches know what's going on, how we're getting hurt, how do we fix it?
What are your thoughts about Joe Flacco, how he played and the move there, and now 2 weeks into it, 0-2 after the change, and Flacco starting out, I mean, coming right out of the gate with a pick six is nobody's dream scenario except the defenders. What are your thoughts about Joe Flacco, how he's playing?
I don't think Joe's playing as well as anticipated, as well as he had done in some moments. I go back to when the move was made, I said, listen, Joe's been really aggressive and he's gotten away with it. It's not like he's been this unbelievable decision maker. And I think you saw that on Taryn's interception. I mean, that is a simple concept of a seam and a hitch route. It wasn't an overly complicated defensive look. Taryn just floats back to the seam. The hitch is completely wide open. If he throws it, it's going to get 15, 20 yards. And he just forces the football in a really aggressive way. So, I'm a little bit surprised that the turnovers have been such a big part. I also don't think you can really go back right now. When they made the move to Joe, it was very clear. They were publicly stating, we think we're a playoff football team and we're making this move because we think this move is the thing that gets us in, or the move that solidifies that. I don't think you now can go back, because when you go back, if you do it now while you're still in the playoff picture, I think you tell your football team, we don't really know what we're doing. We're just hoping that we're making the right decisions. And I think that's a slippery slope if you're Indy.
We've heard traditionally, Dan, that teams that get a lot of turnovers, you always hear this mantra, well, you don't want to depend on turnovers as the reason why you're good on defense. And I would subscribe that the Bills can do more than just take the ball away. I understand there are a lot of categories where they're kind of just middle of the pack to lower third of the league, whether you want to talk about total defense, run defense, pass defense, third down defense. But where they've been top 10 all year is in takeaways and red zone defense, and it's been enough to win some games going away. What do you make of that? Knowing the Bills right now lead the league in turnover differential, they lead the league in points scored off of turnovers, and they're a top 10 red zone defense.
I think the red zone defense is the number one thing that's going to matter here in the backstretch of the half season and the into the playoffs. I think we're in a time when obviously offenses are crazy explosive still, and Baltimore is one of those offenses that is you're not going to stop Baltimore. They're going to go get their yards, and so the same with Kansas City. Kansas City is the most efficient offense in football. So you mean to tell me you're just going to stop them? You just got to be remarkable when it matters the most in that red zone situation. So I do think that there is a truth to the turnover thing that, like, listen, you ride the wave when it's there, but you want to make sure that you're not solely dependent on it, because you might get a game where you don't get them, because the especially as you get into these more game plan specific situation specific games, again, when you're fighting for a potential division championship or the 1 seed or into the playoffs, you get so much more of a hyper focus of how not to beat yourself in those games when it's win or go home. So I think a lot of, there's a difference between a turnover and a takeaway. There's turnovers where the offense just gives them to you. Like I would say that Terran's pick six, that's a turnover. That wasn't necessarily this incredibly creative design or a bait or a force. That was a give by the offense. And then there's moments when it's a takeaway where the defender makes a great play on a ball. That's probably one of Josh's interceptions the other day. And so I think you ride the wave of those, and obviously scoring off of them is another huge part in determining games. But red zone defense for me, I said it week 2, I think, of the season. I said I think this would be the thing that really started to differentiate teams.
So you got these two teams showing. It's like the 5th game since whenever, where two teams with 8+ wins are going to meet in week 10 of the season.
Since 1970.
Since 1970. What do you make of this Chiefs team? I mean, they're not playing lights out. They're not crushing teams. They're not like the 2007 Patriots, right? This is a team that just finds a way. I mean, a blocked field goal is a perfect example of how the Chiefs are winning these games. What are your thoughts about this game?
Steve, I just think they're really hard to beat because of the style that they're playing in, okay? I want everyone to understand that the style that they're playing in is deliberate. It's on purpose. I'll start with the overall philosophy, okay? One, they have a phenomenal defense. So you got to be really good on early downs versus their defense. You got to be able to beat man coverage on a consistent basis, and you cannot get into third and obvious situations, because the way that they can rush with their blitz package on top of their creative coverage groups, there's no way that you think that's the best philosophy going against them. The second part attached to that is you don't get a lot of possessions versus the defense because of the style of the offense in Kansas City. So, like, you've got to be so good at taking advantage of all your possessions, because if you go into a game and think normally you might get like 9, you're going to get 1 or 2 less. And the reason I say that is because this is the number 1 time of possession offense in the NFL. The Kansas City Chiefs I think they possess the ball for like 36 minutes a game or something like that. So you don't get a ton of opportunities versus that elite defense. They have 26 drives on offense, or 10 plays or more. That's by far the most in the NFL. And so they're eating up the clock. They're trying to control the game. You don't get a ton of opportunity versus the defense. And really the only flaw in their team right now that I see is the left tackle. The left tackle is an issue. And that's why that Denver game was close. That's why most of their games are close, is because they're not being explosive on offense, because they can't necessarily be, because they can't protect it. So I think it's a philosophical, organizational thing. They're not going to run away from you, but they're really you got to play a very clean football game versus them, because they don't just give you a lot of opportunity.
How much will, in a game like this that's got a very good chance to probably be nip and tuck, how much do the coordinators come into play here? Is their role, bigger in terms of maybe scheming a few things here or there to help create some kind of difference in the game? I mean, we always talk about, 3 or 4 or 5 big plays in a game can sometimes swing the whole thing and the outcome. Is there more onus on the coordinators to come up with those kinds of answers, especially for 2 receiving cores that are shorthanded in terms of player availability?
Yeah, I would probably say more for Joe Brady. If we're just taking the 4 coordinators, offense, defense for both teams, I'd probably see more for Joe. Steve Spagnuolo, defense coordinator for Kansas City, is one of the best big game coordinators in the history of this league. Obviously, this is a really big one. I think that because you know that how you're going to get challenged on early downs, the more that you like, you're just not going to line up versus Kansas City and just say, hey, my guy better than your guy. That's just not real life against the defense that has the dominant defensive line that they do and the cats that can cover. I think Shakir's massive in this game. I think the more that you can get him matched up on some of the third and or fourth cover guys, I say this with all due respect to Kansas City's defensive players, I don't think that those third and fourth cover guys are what they have been in the past. Okay, so you can get after them a little bit in man coverage. You just have to make sure you know the leverage that you're going to get. Sometimes it's outside, sometimes it's inside. I'm getting super deep into football now. And so I think for Joe, the more that he can create moments for that, an opportunity for that, that goes a long way determining how successful and situationally how successful they'll be.
All right, dude. We'll catch up with you next week.
Enjoy,
Thanks for
guys.
the insight. Appreciate it.